for the past 3 months, I've been studying Korean very consistently, focusing mainly on Sogang Korean 2A. I wanted to share what I've learned, how I studied, my strategy, my progress, and whether I think that this book is worth it, especially if you're preparing for a topic. I'm very systematic. I go through the textbook quite quickly, but I don't skip any tasks. So I did everything. Average, I did 1 chapter per week, and the book has 9 chapters, so that was 9 weeks. But I decided to give myself 3 full months to finish it. So I read all the dialogues out loud, practicing my pronunciation. 오렌지, 오렌지.
맛있게 드세요.
맛있게 드세요.
맛있게 드세요.
맛있게 드세요. And when there is listening, then I listen first, and then so without looking at the text, and then I check the text and combine listening with reading. Another thing is that I write a lot. So since there is a writing part in topic, I decided to put an emphasis on it. At the beginning, I honestly didn't like Sogang Korean so much. I felt it's too academic, and actually this book is designed for use in the classroom. But since I had already bought it, I decided to give it a chance. And after finishing it, I slightly changed my mind. And the reason for that was that I want to prepare for topic. So topic is official in this kind of structure. And Sogang Korean gave me that structure. So now I think that Sogang Korean is a good preparation for topic. So I would recommend it especially to those that value structure, are serious about structure, and want to prepare for topic. The biggest strength is something that I call active processing. So you don't just read a chapter and move on. There are multiple ways to practice your language. So you rewrite your sentences, you summarize your thoughts, you create dialogues, you write short essays, you produce your own sentences. So you process the same grammar and vocab in multiple ways. And each chapter introduces new vocab and grammar, and it forces you to actively use it again and again, but in different contexts. And because the same words appear so many times, then you start using them naturally. And that's how it starts to stick.
더나요. 돌아오다, 막히다, 지나다.
Another area I noticed improvement in was politeness and honorific forms. So using structures like ke or tirida, so it definitely feels more natural now. And that's essential if you want to communicate respectfully with Koreans, but also on topic, right? Since topic is very formal. Another part of my strategy was personalization. So I always try to build sentences that I would use on a daily basis. And then, so instead of writing some general sentences, I write about my routines, my thoughts, my opinions. So very simple ones, but I always try to make it personal. And then the language somehow, it stops being like a set of grammar rules, such as the endings or the particles. It just becomes my tool because I can finally start to express myself. A few weeks ago, I was mostly building isolated sentences, and now, after 3 months, almost 3 months, I can definitely write some more structured paragraphs. They are still simple, of course, but I started using connectors like grammar patterns that link sentences together so that there is a structured text, there is this natural flow, there is a story, some kind of a story, not just separate sentences. And I paid attention to this logical flow, so cause and effect. I use structures like osso, asso, enika, and time more naturally. So towards the end of the book, I entered the reported speech. Honestly, it was one of the most challenging things at this level. But also, I need to say that it was quite satisfying to have the most challenging chapter at the end and just go through it and finally understand it. And at some point, I started using that quite intuitively in my short essays. So I'm quite curious as a learner. I'm not satisfied with because the book says so, then because the grammar rule says so, then do so. No. I want to understand how the language works. And going through so many exercises, I think I finally started to get it, so to understand the logic of Korean a bit more. And so the curiosity helped me when I studied pattim, for example, or the differences between verbs and adjectives. I had many questions. I checked the same things multiple times. And because of that, I feel that my foundations for 2A, for 2B are now quite solid. Realistically, I'm still a beginner, but something has changed definitely. First time I felt it was actually when I completed this very book. But it was very intense, I must say. So before that, I finished Sogang Korean 1B. And before 1B, I used different resources online, but that's not all, of course. So Sogang Korean was my main source, but not the only source. So I try out different books and also different techniques. And I started to feel the language, I think, more analytically. At the same time, I rely less on the translations from my native language. So instead of copying sentences, sentence structures from my native language, I try to think more in Korean. Now it's time for part 2, which is Sogang Korean 2B, but I also have a Talk to Me in Korean book. I expect more structures related to emotions and opinions, and more complex topics for sure, which is crucial for topic 3. And of course, I'm curious what's gonna be in this next 3 months. And as I said, I focused mainly on Sogang Korean, but so that was my opinion and my review of this book. But I might prepare something on my other Korean resources because there were so many, and I think each one gave me something. So yes, have a good one.